And like we mentioned earlier, Lone Felix is joining me. We're still waiting for 3 other guests. Lone Felix is a former Senate candidate for Busia and also a political commentator. Thanks for making time for us. And you are giving me you're telling me what you make of this entire situation, having been in the political field.
First, thank you for having me, Trevor. I think I'm quite happy that there is police restraint. That was one of the biggest fears, because previously the confrontations between NASA supporters and the police has resulted into deaths, it has resulted into mayhem and sometimes a lot of destruction of property. So I am happy that there is police restraint, because that neutrality speaks to something that is positive about the day. As to the import of what is happening, I think it is an indication of a dysfunctional democracy, because if our democratic process and everything had gone well and as democracy is designed to proceed, I think at this particular point the country will be calm, normalcy would have returned, we wouldn't again be still going through this political cycle. So for me, it's an indictment that there is a certain problem in our democratic process, something that is bigger than just partisanship that we need to look at as a nation. And I'm very curious to see just how far the event will go today.
You know, there's been a counter from the government, and I'm not holding brief for anyone. When you say dysfunctional democracy, they say just the opposite, because they say that the sitting president accepted what the Supreme Court ruled against his win, and now we can clearly see that it's almost, nobody really knows what the game plan here is, but they know that the swearing in is happening at Uhuru Park. There's no one who's trying to stop the people from coming in. Some of them would argue that that is a democratic state right there. Do whatever you want, anywhere you want, as long as you don't breach on anybody else's privacy or peace.
I mean, I would understand a government that insists that it is in the office through popular will, but politics and legality are two different questions. You know, the establishment of government should be by popular will, and that is an issue of politics. That is an issue of people choosing their leaders. Those who win having both the legitimacy of the popular will but also the acceptance of the minority. I think those are very two critical limbs of any democratic process. But the biggest danger, one of the biggest dangers that we face as a country, is that we have judicialized our politics. That the president is in office and so by the virtue of conferment of a certain legitimacy by a court and not necessarily by the voting process. So there is a very huge danger there. So we may say, well, the architecture of our constitution says we will go to the ballot. If there is a conflict, we take it to the court, and then once the courts pronounce themselves on the issue, then that becomes our legal reality. But that does not wash away the social pressure points in a nation where there are certain pots of people who feel disenfranchised by the democratic process. And so when I talk about a dysfunctional democracy, it is any democracy that carries just one aspect of the society. You know, whether that aspect is a minority or a majority. A properly functioning democracy is a nation where everybody feels that, yes, I participated in an election, yes, my candidate won or my candidate lost, but legitimately. And I think that is what is missing in this context.
And that is where my main question is, who decides what is the legitimate win or loss? Because when you look at the results, whether it's the IEBC official results or the purported results that NASA has, it's still a very close call. So who decides that this was a legitimate win?
In the end, there is always this animal that you always hear about, which is called public court, that we are going to take this into public court or into the court of public opinion, rather.
But there are those who shape the public opinion.
Yes. Ultimately, legitimacy lies in the hearts of individual citizens, because the state is founded on individuality, on individual rights. So you have to accept this outcome, I have to accept this outcome, then collectively we reach an agreement that yes, this is our government, whether I voted for it or I did not vote for it. So the very primary person in this in this whole context is the individual citizen. Now, when you move to that, when you say, of course, constitutionally, IEBC is the body mandated to declare an outcome of a presidential election. But then there are issues as to, does it enjoy public confidence? Does it enjoy considerable public confidence? Or does it even enjoy absolute public confidence? And in this case, IEBC probably enjoys the confidence of 50% of Kenyans, which is a worrying trend for any credible institution. And then you take it to the next level when people contest what IEBC has declared. The next person who determines the legality is the judiciary, and in this case, the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court has pronounced itself on this matter, and even at a personal level, whether I agree with it or not, at a personal level, I know that the architecture of our legality has established a government, and that government is in place. But that does not take away the fact that millions of Kenyans have questions. So as to the issue of completion, as to the issue of who determines with the finality who is the legitimate, who is legitimately in government, yes, that is the judiciary, but a country is not an instrument of law. A country is an instrument of relations. It's an instrument of social bonds. It's about how I feel when relating to you. It's about how this county feels relating to the other. It's about how this tribe feels relating to the other. It's about how this political formation feels. Can it express its opinion? Can its values and aspirations also be espoused in the journey of the nation?
So when you say the architecture of our legality has established a government,
yes,
it's the same Supreme Court that also nullified the results of the same election that involved the same two parties.
Yes.
So then where do we draw the line? Where does the solution lie? Because whatever happens in this country, half of it will always feel disenfranchised, half of it will always feel they're not satisfied with the results, depending on what the other person says, because this could go either way. In any political contest, whichever side decides that I did not win legitimately, that is the feeling that they express to their supporters, and the supporters rise up to the same conclusion.
I think the problem that this nation has, it's not a legal problem. It's a social and political problem. So where does the solution lie? The solution lies in us making our politics right. That is the first step. And when I say we make our politics right, I mean politics is the art of control of resources in the end. So it is about every Kenyan feeling that I have a say in the resources. And I think that is where we've lost it as a country. When we peg the conflicts that we see on individuals and make this an issue about Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta, the bigger question is, do we all 40 million Kenyans feel part of this Kenyan journey? So when we make right our politics, then that will be the first step in solving these problems. And then the second aspect, like I've mentioned to you, this is also a social problem. Yeah. It's about how all these small nations were brought together into forming a republic called Kenya. What are the social contracts that we established amongst ourselves? What makes me want to relate with you that is way more important than what I could achieve if I am alone? The questions about nationhood, the questions about we are better together. And these are African questions. Other countries have actually grappled with them and sort of found nationhood. But Kenya, I think we are very good at creating artificial solutions, running into courts and creating laws, how we solve certain social issues. And you cannot legislate social bonds. This is about nation building. This is about how everybody feels that they've been brought on board. And Trevor, it would be very wrong for anybody, whether you're in government or whether you're in opposition, to ever imagine that everybody in this country feels included. That is not what is there. Very many Kenyans still feel they are not part of the Kenyan dream, they're not part of the Kenyan journey, and that is what we need to address.
Do you reckon the voting process should be changed so that it's not the 50+1 and winner takes it all situation?
Those are very touchy questions. But definitely, you know, every country, when you evaluate yourself and you realize that this particular mode of
Hold that thought. We see some supporters in Kibera. Let's listen into what they're saying. That's where Setolale is standing by.
Not the cabinet. Yeah. Did not do it next year.
Those are live pictures from Kibera where youth are still making their way to the Uhuru Park. You know, continued wall-to-wall coverage will be cutting in and out of several places just to make sure you're up to date with every single thing that's happening around you. So as soon as anything happens, you know we will be there. We'll also be crossing over to Kisumu in just a bit to find out what's happening there. So far, the streets look clear. Business seems to be running as usual. We were told that yesterday there was a bit of fracas there because some supporters wanted to be ferried to Nairobi, and that did not happen. As Uko Kusa was telling us earlier on, there was a stampede. One person lost their lives, and we're still following up all the details to give you what we know so far. Another issue that came up is in Mombasa, some buses were stopped that were ferrying NASA supporters to Nairobi right now, but we've been informed that the police have released the buses ferrying the NASA supporters earlier on, seized for traffic offences, and now they're free to proceed to Nairobi. As soon as they get here, we'll definitely be talking to you about that and keeping you updated. Our very own Leila Mohammed is at Uhuru Park. We'll also be catching up with her to see what's happening there. Earlier on, the Homa Bay Women representative Gladys Wanga was speaking at Uhuru Park, and she said that they expect the NASA leaders there for at this particular point, maybe in the next 20 minutes or so, because back then she said they'll be there in an hour. Still expecting my guest, but Lone Felix is still with me. You are giving me the response to whether the voting process should be changed, because the 50+1 and winner takes it all situation seems to be ruffling feathers the wrong way, whichever side the win goes to.
A winner takes all kind of situation definitely does not work for a multi-ethnic, a multiracial society like Kenya. And so then there are many questions as to whether we even, at first, even this pure presidential system is what we really needed as a country, or did we need a parliamentary system and all that. Every country at some point evaluates itself and realizes that we need to change something. For example, the United States has an electoral college system. And people are questioning it at this particular point. But what did they decide? They decided and said, beyond the voice of the majority, there is a genuine need to ensure that the smaller voices in the society feel that they are part of determining the leadership of a nation. And I think, in part, not a similar mode, but that particular thinking is what we need in Kenya, where it is very easy in this country, the way we are right now, to have an autocracy of the majority, where you have 2, 3, 4 tribes coming together and ruling forever, if they make an alliance and ruling forever. Or even where a band of smaller tribes come together and they provide leadership forever. So I think what we need to do is to look at the architecture of our country and say, how do we establish a government? Yes, one, by popular will, but second and most importantly, by ensuring that all those small voices within the society feel part of it. But then, Trevor, there's also the other question of just political indiscipline, you know? Political indiscipline here is where institutions are interfered by political players, where certain political players do not accept results of the election, where when we have a conflict, as we have right now, we don't even have the courage to talk to each other, and yet we have a conflict. These are just issues of political indiscipline. It's just an issue of the Kenyan voter sitting down and saying, these leaders do not have the best interest of the country. At heart, maybe we need a different crop of leaders to provide leadership for the nation.
Now that you brought it up, do you reckon there should be dialogue? And who should this dialogue involve?
I think the country needs to dialogue with itself. And who should dialogue? Like we agree, and like many people agree, what we have currently in the country is a political problem. I can assure you, if President Uhuru Kenyatta and the NASA leader Raila Odinga met and shook hands today, it will be one step towards solving a lot of the problems that we have in this country. So there is an element of politics that needs to be resolved, and that can only be achieved through political dialogue. I am not a fan of people dialoguing about power sharing and governments of national unity and all that, because what that will rob this country is the rigor of competing visions, because this country develops faster when we have two different powerful visions competing each other. That is how our politics grows, that is how our democracy grows. So we need an aspect of political players, key political players, acknowledging that there is a problem and sitting down. And I don't know why it has not happened, by the way, because when I listen to the public rhetoric coming from NASA, is they say we want electoral justice, you know? And when you listen for the public rhetoric that is coming from Jubilee, they say we'll discuss anything else but not elections. Wait for 2022. I understand the reluctance of Jubilee, you know, to engage in a conversation about elections, because that may be like an acceptance that there was a certain level of illegitimacy or anything like that. But don't we have a country to preserve? You know, is political ego really too big that we cannot sacrifice a bit and just have tea? These guys have invited each other to State House and had tea before. Yeah. You know, what is so difficult at this particular time? So once we have that political dialogue, much more importantly, we need to have a substantive dialogue that is about economic resources, that is about social cohesion, issues of opportunity, issues of youth unemployment, because these are the real problems. In 4 or so years, Uhuru Kenyatta will be out of the scene. But if we don't approach issues of youth unemployment, we will be reaching 60–70% unemployment, and that is a much bigger problem to the state, to the political class, than the political bickering that we are seeing today. Yeah,
and Felix Blamwell Njururi here on Twitter says, Trevor, can you ask your analyst to compare the Kenyan situation with that of the US, where Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but Donald Trump took the presidency on minority electoral college? Current devolved system is not a winner-take-it-all.
And what the commentary that I made about the US system is, as a society, they realized that popular will is very important. But even more important is the fact that each state needs to feel that it has participated in determining who the leader of the nation is. So these tiny states all feel that, yes, Trump is president because our voice was heard. And sometimes, honestly, everybody being carried on board is more important than majority being carried on board. If we can design a system that allows every minority in this country, every young person, every woman, every county to feel that the representative of the head of the representative of the national government at the executive level represents my voice or accessed that seat through my participation, we would have solved a lot of problems. But we cannot purport to move ahead as a country when you have about 5 counties that entirely did not participate in elections. You have a set of counties that you know, just had 6%, 10%, 11%, or 30%. I think that is the comparison that I would give.
Yeah, and when you talk about representation and the number of people who should feel included, isn't that what the government would say they're trying to achieve by even creating other positions that were not even there, like the CAS position? And are we then just looking at a situation where we just dish out positions so that everybody feels included? You say if you're from Rift Valley, for example, then one of your person is there. Does that mean you're included in the government?
No, the issue of creating positions, that's a bigger problem. I think we are bloating our public wage bill when at this particular level, the expenditure that we put to development and recurrent expenditure is really a big issue. Our debt levels are skyrocketing. I don't think this is the time to bloat, the public wage bill by creating a position. I honestly do not believe that some of these positions will streamline efficiency within the government bureaucracy. I don't believe that, because the more decision makers you add to a bureaucracy, the slower it becomes, as it were. Inclusion is not about who holds what position, but it is about what service goes to which citizen in the end. And that is what we need to focus on. If you dish if you dish a cabinet position to a certain, to a person who comes from a certain tribe, how many members of that tribe will access that person? Very few. That guy will live here in Nairobi. When he goes home, his house and home is guarded. So inclusion should be about service, about what access to what resources and opportunities everybody has, not about who holds what position, as it were. But if we were to take that path of saying we now need to include people from different tribes, there is a lot of opportunities to do that beyond creating new positions. We have an audit that was just released by the Public Service Commission, which says which tribe dominates which position or which ministry. Why don't we first go and rationalize that and make sure that everybody else is included before going to blot the public bureaucracy and just increase the wage bill for what I would consider really a non-issue at this time. Yes.
But isn't that what devolution was meant to achieve, or did we just lose track with devolution altogether?
Devolution, and this is sort of going to sound a bit controversial, Trevor, but devolution really is not what we are hyping it as a country on a number of fronts. The first is this devolution, at best, will develop counties at the same pace they are. So it is going to maintain the gap of inequality that already exists there, because the way we allocate resources almost ensures that if each governor was to perform equally, then Busia will grow, yes, rich, Kiambu will grow rich, but Kiambu will always remain richer and Busia will become rich. So it will always maintain a certain level of inequality. The architecture of devolution also devolves resources. It does, and perhaps that is the silent failure in our devolution architecture. Because if we had devolved a bit of political power, then the lucrative nature of the presidency wouldn't be existing 5 years down the line. But the fact that we are still willing to die and kill each other and fight about the presidency, it communicates something that maybe the political powers we donated to governors and other figureheads within the county does not really communicate to what the citizen perceives as the solution. This is not to reduce the value of devolution. No, it is critical, it is important, it has really improved lives, but there are bigger questions beyond saying, but you now have your governors that still need to be addressed in the country.
All right, Dr. Japheth Kavinga Kaluyu is joining us now, former presidential candidate. Thanks for making time for us. Before I come to you, I'd like to find out what your sentiments are about this entire situation that's happening right now. But before we do that, we are doing a wall-to-wall coverage of the day as it proceeds. Kisumu, Kibera, right here in Nairobi as well. That's at Uhuru Park. In Mombasa, we are taking a short break on NTV today. When we come back, we'll get into the discussion and also give you an update of what's happening around you. See you in a bit. And we're following up breaking news for you where NTV and Citizen seemingly have been switched off on the free-to-air platforms. We're only available on DSTV, and Ken was just explaining why that happened earlier on today. There are some officials who went in there and, of course, cut our transmission. That's why there's a lot of reaction on Twitter as well. It's just what we're following for you right now. I'll be giving you more details. There's no explanations have been given, but yesterday there were threats to the media not to air the NASA event live. And I have my guest in studio with me, and that's where we want to start off. And joining us right now is Dr. Japheth Kavinga Kaluyu, former presidential candidate, and also David Osiany, political commentator, and Lone Felix was here with us earlier on. He's also a political commentator and a former Senate candidate for Busia. Dr. Japheth, I'll start with you. Let's just get reaction to the breaking news. What do you make of this whole situation? Was this the right way of doing it? I think it's throwing you under the bus there, but you
No problem.
Yeah.
There is, this is, I would say, everybody, nobody knows what the projection would be after every event that is going to be happening in Uhuru Park. But I would say someone is thinking about what happens to the common person in case things happen, violence. I'm sure it's something to do with violence. And I'm sure the government is probably, or other people, trying to think big about how can they prevent, you know, or it could be a technical. I don't want to, you know, do a sweeping statement. Yeah. But if it's technical, I'm sure they are repairing it. If it is not technical, there could be a number of issues. Which
we
means
know it's not technical.
Or if we know it's not technical, then there could be a personal engineering by an institution or by a person or by whatever case. But I would think that person's mental status would be to think about possibility of preventing violence. Many governments, if we have to tessellate this or to run it parallel to what has happened to other governments when they are trying to, or people within the countries trying to prevent violence, they probably have done that. This is not the first time it has been done. It is common. And certain channels are switched off, or not. Most of them, they are, just to make sure that it does not incite people. That would be the trend of thinking. But the question of whether it is right or wrong, it is a different thing. I usually approach things on an analytical or research-based, you know, approach. I don't want to assume anything else. But I think the end of the day, it would be how do we prevent any, even though if it is swearing in goes on, can it go smoothly? Can it go without a lot of hitches in terms of violence and also risking people's property, personal lives, and all that? That would be the frame of mind of if I try to project what the person or institution or situation could be.
Does not covering it mean it didn't happen?
No, it does not, but it controls quite a number of things. It controls population reactions, because you're talking political science here. How do people react to situations? Okay. So I think that whatever is happening is about controlling the reactions of the people as a result of airing it live. So basically it's very common sense, it's straightforward. You air, it is not allowed. That means the process of doing it may have an effect to the population, okay. And that's what is being prevented.
I see Lone and David shaking their heads. Let's start with David.
No, I think, you know, when Japheth speaks, I would expect more from him because he has stayed in true democracies that we only cherish to get to their mark. And Japheth understands that in the US, where he has stayed, there is a freedom and the rights, you know, the media freedoms and rights, and they are uninterfered with. Now, whenever the state interferes with him, he must be the first to repudiate the state for doing that. He shouldn't hang on the balance about this. That it is wrong is as obvious as it gets. He ought to know that just as the Americans who consume everything they watch and then decide based on their own intuition or intellect what is the best way forward, Kenyans have the capability of, you know, making the right decision under the circumstances. I think there's also been a lot of media talk trying to project the possibility of violence, which I can only say is mostly unfortunate, really. The NASA guys on my way here, met them, they're just cheering, and actually at some point I was following one car and I heard one of them saying in Luo, "Don't hit a car, don't hit a car, we are staying orderly," you know? And I was very impressed. That's the sense. They are just joyful and glad. So I understand the fears of the state. The state seems to fear, of course, once you handle the character Raila Odinga as a student of Kenyan politics, I know that once you handle the character Raila Odinga, you can never tell to what extent this will go. That must be their fear. But I don't think that switching off, you know, or blackouts are the best way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me respond to that quickly. Let me respond to that quickly because shots fired, shots fired. What I'm trying to say is that there is questions. The first part of what he agreed with me later is what the state could have been trying to do. That was the trend of why the switch off of the technicalities.
Which is wrong.
We did not talk about wrong or right.
Is it wrong? I want a straight answer. That's what I'm trying to ask for. Is it wrong for the state to have to cause this shutdown?
It depends on the circumstances.
As a president, would you do that?
You do not have all the facts and what happened behind. So you are throwing your hands in the air, in the dark, trying to hit something. Okay. So you do not have facts. That's a fact. The first part had good answers. Yeah. But for the wrong question. All your analysis was good, but what were you answering? You're answering whether democracy, the free expression is good or it is not good. It is good. Nobody's disputing. So you're answering obvious questions, but you're trying to throw it to me whether I'm trying to say whether freedom of expression, association, and all that. That is okay. Democracy is very noisy. Their freedom of association or assembly, it is okay. We are trying to talk about whether the current process you're talking of NASA, NASA was not even in the question. You brought it up, that now you brought the NASA in. We are trying to say, did NASA exhaust all the possible? And I'm an independent candidate. If Kenyatta does things that are right, I'll say it.
Dr. Kaluyu, if you were president today, would you have done the same thing?
That's the question.
Yeah, so if that's the question, let me answer the question. So let's answer, this is a different question, but I will say clearly that your answers were right, but wrong question. Now, this is the right question. Yeah. Whether I would have done it, I would have done. What I would have done is let them, if they have freedom, they present, they say that they are supposed to assemble there. We check whether they got a letter and giving the notice to Japheth. Do they have all the necessary things that they are supposed to submit? Because there's framework. If they did that, they can assemble. We are not just going to say here, they may have done it or not have done it.
You realize that has nothing to do with the media. That's technicalities on
so
their
you're
side.
You're talking of assembly, you're talking of the shutdown. No, I would not shut down the media. Oh, I would say there's a freedom of expression and it's democracy. The question is whether we handled issues that were supposed to be happening before they happened. Did we prepare enough? We could have used the same channels to educate the population what could happen, what they should do or not. And if it happens, what's going to be happening or what the expected reaction is. But we will not, I don't think I would prevent anybody assembling, expressing themselves or political decisions and all that. That's an obvious thing of democracy. So I will not switch anything off, but I would have warned them what are the consequences are likely to be. Maybe they're not doing anything wrong. I mean, they're not going to cause violence. We don't have to assume that they're going to cause violence.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we don't know. And following one car wasn't enough. We needed to see all sides because statistics has to have more numbers.
But we are sure there hasn't been violence reported this morning.
Far there's no
and we also agree, Dr. Japheth, that, as you say, that shutting down the television stations is wrong. Okay. That's the basic. What informs that is
Felix.
Thank you.
Unless there's a reason for it.
Trevor, the media freedom is guaranteed for and protected under the Constitution. And what has happened is an affront to the constitutional freedoms. It is an affront to what will be the rules of natural justice, that if NTV or Citizen have done something that is not right, then they need to be heard, and there are channels and processes, not sending personnel with cars and to your transmissions and cutting them off. There's not. We don't also need to go into the science of what is behind this. This is happening within a certain context. A context of people being summoned to State House and being warned, a context of the Editors Guild coming out and condemning that situation. And then just to buttress what my brother David was trying to say, it is very painful to imagine that you can censor or determine to a rational Kenyan what is right and wrong, how they react to a certain piece of information and not. As a matter of fact, and I will say this without the fear of contradicting myself, is the average Kenyan is way much more brighter than many of our leaders who make some of these decisions. They will look at information that goes to them in the context of their own circumstances, in the context of their own preferences, and they will make certain decisions. So what has happened today, shutting down media houses, is unconstitutional, it is illegal, and it must be condemned. And just coming back to my senior, whether he says David was answering the wrong question or the right question, that is not here or there. I think he is double speaking, and he was a presidential candidate who many of us looked up to. He needs just to set the record straight. What the government is doing is illegal. It is against the Constitution.
He's already said if he was a president,
assuming,
he would do that.
assuming it is the government.
It is the government.
Dr. Kaluyu.
The government.
Okay. Let's move from this topic of switching off the TV stations and get into the issue of swearing in. I already had Felix's opinion of it. What do you make of this situation? Is it the right move by NASA?
So the swearing, as far as I'm concerned, is that there is a registration. It is, to me, I look at it as more symbolic than anything else. There is a registration of some sort of dissatisfaction. We cannot ignore it as a country. Let's even say it's a few people. Democracy shows majority. Just because the majority may have won does not mean we ignore the minority, even if it's a few people, because one life is too many. So I think it is important to register it. Whether the method of doing it is right or wrong is a different thing. I think there are many channels. The current look of things is that if I try to swear in when there is already a sitting president or whoever was sworn in before, I would look at it as a push towards someone who is trying to kind of push towards confrontation. Confrontation doesn't mean it's always a violent idea, always, not necessarily. But it's a registration of some sort of dissatisfaction. That dissatisfaction needs to be looked at, and it cannot be ignored, because there's quite a bit of people who are talking on the media, people talking on the newspapers, in the media houses of dissatisfaction. So we cannot ignore that. Now, I do not want solely to kind of blame the leaders, Raila or Kenyatta. These are people, as a leader, I've led in many places, and it's, you know, big organizations. And sometimes you have people surrounding you. And as a presidential candidate, you become a concept more than a person. Raila is a concept. He cannot just do things as he wishes. He gets advice. He gets to be told, this is what we are trying to support you to do. If you don't do these things, we are not going to support you. The same thing as Kenyatta. To me, the bubble around these two people, in any country and dimensions that I come from, mature democracy, which I've watched and I've looked at in more than 20 years, most before Clinton or Obama, they had a conflict before they went there. The people surrounding them, they came around and told them, you know what, let's look at it. And they solved the issues before they happened. This is not what I'm seeing here happening, because Kenyatta and Raila, they are family friends, they are friends, they talk as they tell us. So people around them and the clergy and other people could just come around, but they have personal interests. That is the problem. And what is happening is just a snippet of corruption. You can talk about it later, because it's people saying we need to, some people, we needed to be there so that he can appoint our people. Yeah. Do you want, like my brother said, do you want a person who is from your place, or you want a person who can perform? You don't care where he comes from as long as he solves your problem. So that's where I stand.
Now, David, we were coming to you on the reactions and whether you think this move is the right move.
Scott Philip Howard says you cannot pick and choose which set of freedoms to defend. Just before I go to swearing in, you either defend all of them or be against all of them. And what's going on, I think, because I am sure the president has his team watching, and I like addressing him rather directly. President Kenyatta, it's in your interest to have the TVs operating. You're going to create pandemonium unnecessarily. For those who cannot watch, then they will start perceiving there might be something else apart from the swearing in that's going on. At that point, you will not be able to control the actions of these people. So it's in your best interest and your team to ensure that the freedom, the media freedom, press freedom, is upheld. That said, we are on to the swearing in.
What happens next? That's what everybody else is asking.
You see, this is a very new thing. None of us can tell what happens next. None of us, most Kenyans did not even think it would happen. So I think part of the reason the government is now caught in between a rock and a hard place is they had, believed that somehow in the night or by yesterday, the former prime minister would again come up and say, you know what, because he's quite a magnanimous character. Yeah. But it seems he's followed through with his threats to be sworn in. Now, of course, we cannot apply ourselves to two sets of facts. The fact is that constitutionally, there is a way a president is sworn in, and acceptably so. However, we must then revisit what may be the issue going on here. Symbolism in different contexts and different democracies have sometimes been, they have forerun the real thing. So you will see opposition parties in other countries make their own flags, not because that is the official flag of that country, but because they are sending a signal that we are going to take over. And what I think, I'm very certain, almost certain, that Raila is not under any illusion that he will take state power, because the instruments of state power may not be handed down to him. But what he has probably succeeded to do is to gather his people together to reaffirm his spot at the top of that half of the country that is disaffectioned, and to be able to ride on that to kind of bash on President Uhuru's legitimacy. It is in President Kenyatta's interest to try and secure that nationwide acceptance, whether or not the people liked him, based on the fact that he believes he was elected. Because NASA says that on the 8th, they believe the election was not free and fair. And they're able to push the line that the judiciary agrees with us, that there was systemic and systematic irregularities and, and mistakes by and large. That alone, to some extent, gives them a bit of credit. I may not agree on whether they should have gone on for the 26th election. It's my personal opinion. Maybe they should have gone for the 26th election, but they held it. That if the 8th was that adulterated, there was a chance, a huge one, that the state would machinate to have the 26th election happen under the same circumstances and with the same results, predetermined results. So they have then decided that based on the 8th election, 8th of August, they are going to use those figures. Of course, it's against the law. We cannot apply ourselves to two sets of facts. That's not the law. But remember, they had promised, NASA had promised, that they will kick out the law. They will not obey the current.
So what is the solution to this standoff?
No, the solution has been umpteen times. I have repeated that President Kenyatta needed to have climbed down and reached out. Look at what George Weah did in Liberia. When he finished the election, after the bruising battle with the former vice president of Liberia, he found it and deemed it fit to go to the home of the ex-vice president of Liberia. And there he extended an olive branch and said, listen, sir, we have our differences, the election is over, this is what it is, but I want to borrow from your end. Kindly lend me a couple of people who can pursue your vision for the nation under my leadership. And I will grant them the chance to do just that. Now, President Kenyatta has not reached out to Raila. Some people say he was in a church one day and he said, oh, I'm ready to talk. That's different from taking the bold step to talk.
Dr. Japheth, solutions?
So I think I've listened to what my friend David here has said carefully. I agree with him on some aspects, but on other aspects, like majority of the country has to generally agree. That is not the way democracy works all the time. It may be something we aspire to, but democracy is simply a simple majority. A lot of places, including Europe, United States, a lot of people just are very bitter, and these fights are not unique. They are fought in other countries, in Congress, in Democrats in the Congress in the United States. Even the war is still on about Obamacare and all those things. So the chaos and the noise for democracy is going to continue. It's not going to end. If we are looking for a place where it's going to end, Kenyans, be ready. It will never end, because that's how democracy works. The mistake I think that happened is that one of advice. After the 8th, I was part of the 8th. It was nullified, right? and it was applied by Honorable Raila Odinga. They celebrated. They won the case. As a matter of fact, I think Jubilee were very mad, or they were very disappointed. But however, they went back again. The mistake was they advised not to attend the 26th.
I'm just looking for the solutions now that we're already here.
So when we are already here, the solution, I don't believe the symbolic expression is going to have to be very effective. I agree with him on that. There are no instruments of power. There is no central bank. There is no Congress that is separate. It can run. So the thing is that after it is done, it is a registration of dissatisfaction. Now, the elders from the both sides who surround President Kenyatta, they should meet also the elders. They should never allow Kenyatta and Raila have a direct confrontation.
No, Felix, David, Felix, solutions, very briefly.
So what?
Just one sentence.
What today's event will do is to compound the political crisis. I think one of the key solutions, like I previously said, is the president reaching out, because it must be in his interest that this nation is preserved. So he has to reach out, talk to the opposition, and then from there, that is it's a small step, but the first step that must be taken in resolving.
We have to leave it there. Dr. Japheth, Kaluyu, Kavinga, thank you for making time for us. David Osiany, political commentator, and Lone Felix, Senate Busia candidate, former Senate Busia candidate, and also political commentator. Thanks for watching NTV today. My name is Trevor Ombija. Thanks for watching.